Welcome to Aspirations Over Hesitations, the podcast for high-achieving women whose ambitions are bigger than their fears. I'm your host, Alli Eldridge. As a mom, wife, and Fortune 500 company retiree, I know what it's like to wear many hats while still wanting more out of life. Whether it's stepping off the corporate ladder to lean into motherhood, healing yourself from chronic health issues to bring home that miracle baby, or launching your own business, you'll be inspired by stories of women who are going for the big things in life, in spite of anxiety that they too have experienced. Here, you'll find a community of moms who can relate to wanting what others say is impossible. They embrace alternative ways of thinking, working, and being, even when it comes with some uncertainty. One thing's for sure. If you want to live an unconventional, extraordinary life full of freedom and flexibility, you have to be willing to do things a little differently. Are you ready to say yes to choosing your aspirations over hesitations? Let's jump in.
Mason is a Dallas-based acupuncturist and traditional Chinese herbalist who believes in the power of happiness, ease, and daily habits that build a strong foundation of health. Her biggest goal is to help each of her patients make health easy in order to free up their lives for joy, love, and connection to their higher purpose. Mason specializes in all things reproductive health, including fertility, and I cannot wait for you all to get to hear from her today. We're going to jump right into it. So, Mason, like me, you also experienced a loss with your first pregnancy before the beautiful baby girl that you have today. How did that experience affect your journey into motherhood?
I think the whole journey of becoming a mom was, I really, looking in hindsight, had to view it all as an experience I had to have in order to connect with all of my patients on like a deeper level and really understand what they're going through. Again, that's how I see it now. In the moment, it felt hard and frustrating, and it actually made me really question myself as a practitioner, feeling like, how is this happening to me? I'm kind of the one here trying to help people avoid these things. But probably one of the biggest highlights or things that helped me in that time was all the experience I've had with my patients and knowing that, if all these women I was surrounded by could get through this, like I knew I could too. And so it just taught me a lot of empathy, and it just showed me even more so how strong moms are.
Yeah, for sure. And what was kind of like your timing of when that happened and then when you went on to conceive your daughter?
So we had been trying probably for, I want to say like 10 or 11 months. And we then went on, I think it was actually the next cycle that then got pregnant with my daughter. So we were really, yeah, it happened really quickly. And so I feel really fortunate,
That's amazing. Yeah. I know there's so much anxiety though. I mean, at least I felt that like after the loss and then being pregnant again, it just kind of, I don't know, it makes it a little bit of a different pregnancy experience.
It did. And when I was pregnant with Lucia, I had a subchorionic hematoma, like the hemorrhaging, the bleeding, and which basically feels like you're having a miscarriage. And so I will say I feel like with the miscarriage, I was actually okay. Like I was devastated when it happened, but I felt hopeful that I was kind of excited just that I got pregnant. Like I was like, Oh my God, like I can actually get pregnant. I kind of was feeling like I couldn't. And, but then when that happened, like when the bleeding happened a second time, I actually just kind of broke, and then it turned out that everything was fine.
Wow.
But I feel like in that moment, I was like really thinking about all my patients who go through like recurrent losses and things like that, where I just felt really hopeless.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's so good to hear, honestly, about the bleeding, because I know when people are pregnant and they have spotting or bleeding, like it's terrifying. And of course, your mind goes to the worst. But then you do also hear those stories of like it being fine and it's actually not a loss. And so it's good to hear that you had that as well.
Yes, totally.
And I know you said you felt like you kind of had some support just from working with a lot of people that were on their own fertility journey. Was there anything else that helped you get through the trauma that you felt from the miscarriage and or like when you started experiencing that bleeding with your daughter?
I felt really supported by my husband, and I was actually, because when I got pregnant the first time, had already started communication with my midwife, Nikki, and she was there for me so quickly with the second and with the bleeding and everything. I felt really supported by her. And I'd also talked to my mom. The first time I got pregnant, I hadn't told my mom or anyone, thinking like, oh, if I have a loss, I don't know if I would want to talk to anyone about it. And then I quickly realized I wish I had, because it's very hard to tell someone you've had a miscarriage if they didn't know you were pregnant.
Yeah.
So then when I got pregnant, I told my family like immediately. I think I was like exactly 4 weeks. It was like a period. We happened to have a family dinner, and so I just told them. So I had my mom to support me, and so those were really the biggest things. And then my midwife just telling me to treat it like as if I had given birth, like take my time, really nourish myself, slow down so much more than, I thought that I should. And all those things I know really helped me recover.
That is such good advice. And I don't think we hear that enough, but like it really is. I mean, your body has delivered and you have all of the hormonal effects and everything that you're dealing with. And then the grief and everything too. Of course, it's just like compounding.
Exactly. Yes.
So, how did your own journey into motherhood influence what you do for work and then some of the philosophies and approaches you take with your clients? Because it sounds like you were already doing this for work when you went through these experiences, but then your practice, of course, has shifted and evolved over the years as well.
Definitely. I think it's like with anything we go through, we realize we actually didn't know anything about it until we've gone through it ourselves. I feel like that was so true with trying to get pregnant, being pregnant, having my baby. And so really going through these experiences myself just helped me understand what it really felt like, what it really felt like to have a negative pregnancy test month after month after month, and to know where my head was actually at, even though I knew all the things that I should be thinking and I should be doing, but so now whenever I'm talking to women, and I think we always put up such a strong front, I'm like, I know what you're actually thinking. Like, I really know where your head is at. And so it's just helped me connect on a much deeper level with my patients. And I think take just an even more soft and more open and more patient approach, to just have I would even say just scratch the surface of the experience most of my patients are having. Like I can't even begin to fathom where many of those women actually are on their journeys and what they've gone through. And then I would say the other side of it is once I had my daughter and I realized what all these women are trying for and what I realized I was trying for, that I think, again, you don't know what you're getting until you finally meet that baby, that I just feel so strongly that anyone who wants that should be able to have it. Like it is the greatest joy and, the biggest just wonder and experience of my life. And so I feel like if I was fighting before for my patients, now it's just like 100 times that.
Oh, I love that. And I see that in you so much. Many of your clients are struggling to conceive, and they're also working these very busy 9-to-5 style jobs. Can you talk about some of the observations that you have on how those things are connected?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of variation and I think answers to that question because, every person and every woman, their life is different, their health, their constitution is different. And so I think everyone handles stressors like, working 40, 50, 60 hours a week differently. And So like I have a lot of women who are like, my coworker just sneezed and got pregnant and we're just as stressed as each other, for a framework. But I think especially in today's world where a lot of women they're already taxed physically, whether that be chronic infections or environmental toxins or, trauma that they've had in their life, whatever, has maybe affected their constitution and their life to date, that then we handle that 9 to 5 stress differently. And then it's also looking at then what do they say, like 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9, then what are you doing with that extra time, right? Are you going home and resting? Are you trying to get a workout in every single day, plus working a second job or another hustle or something, so it's a very individualized approach. And then I would say the last piece of that picture is also age. I think someone who is 25 working, a 9 to 5 versus someone who's 38 or 39 or 40, it's going to affect you differently. And that, has a lot to do with Chinese medicine and the way we look at the body. So we look at, if we kind of make it very simple, we're talking about yin and yang energy in the body. We think of yin as like our more feminine energy. We think of that as, I like to say, like our estrogen or our juicy energy. I think of that as like the nutritive substance of our eggs and our follicles. As we age, that naturally declines. We know that we're all kind of on our way to, perimenopause and menopause, like just naturally we're on this graded scale. But then we have other things that make that decline happen quicker. And that is like the overwork, the burning the candle at both ends, staying up till 11 p.m. watching TV and drinking a lot of alcohol and harsh foods. And so we have all these different factors. We maybe have age could be a factor, someone 35 and up, who is also working a 9 to 5, who also goes out and, maybe drinks every weekend, maybe not copious amounts, but every weekend, has overextended themselves socially and emotionally, then we're really like driving that clock a lot faster.
Yeah.
So, it's very situational, it's very individual, but I do think that just overall hustle and grind culture plays a big role in many of my patients' journeys of trying to conceive.
For sure. Well, and it is, like you said, the compounding effect. And I felt that when I was working in corporate, where it wasn't just the job. Like I wasn't saying, oh, it's this job that I had that's so stressful and horrible. Like it really wasn't. I actually had a good job and I really liked my team, but it was the lifestyle that it led me to lead of like always rushing to eat, then being in traffic and having that stress, and then working and then coming home and then trying to cram everything into like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours because I was trying to get to bed at a decent time. And like you said, the workout and just all the things, the social, and then having wine because you were like just trying to get your mind to shut down so that you could fall asleep at night.
Yes, 100%. That's so it.
You mentioned the Constitution. Will you talk a little bit about that for people that are less familiar with Chinese medicine?
Yeah, so in Chinese medicine, we diagnose based on patterns. Like I'll give you a couple of examples that I think are easy to see. So we would say someone who has like really painful periods and you think maybe the blood is like really dark and clotty and, lots of cramping, we say that's blood stagnation. That's a pattern, that's a diagnosis. Something else would be someone who bloats very easily after meals and feels very tired and sluggish after eating something heavier. We might say they have spleen qi deficiency. So we have all these different patterns that we use to diagnose what we would consider symptoms or illnesses. But in addition to that, every individual has their own constitution of these same, elements we're talking about and same organ systems. So it's kind of like what someone's tendency or nature is. So somebody who is more of like a liver type is going to be maybe more like tall, long and lean. They're going to be more quick to frustration. They're going to more easily develop digestive issues whenever they are overly stressed. So there's these different characteristics that make up these constitutions. And depending on your constitution, you might be more prone to like I said, agitation or frustration or exhaustion. So whenever you're under stress, you're going to be more prone to these specific sets of symptoms or, imbalances.
Okay. So then does acupuncture help you kind of get out of like those hot spots of your constitution into more of the balanced state?
Yeah, I would say that's one way that acupuncture works is we're always trying to bring those elements into balance, but also if you can understand your constitution, like, oh, when I'm stressed, I always get constipation, or
Mhm.
something like that, or like, oh, when I'm stressed, I always get a headache. Um, and then you can learn how to work with it with your lifestyle too. So just kind of, it's just another way of looking at your body and understanding what you're predisposed to, and then knowing how to keep that in balance. Because in the same way, when that constitution is balanced, these things are almost like your talents or your skill set. So it's just keeping things in balance and really knowing yourself.
That's awesome. And there's so many parallels to corporate too, because in corporate, we are always talking about knowing your strengths and your superpowers and leaning into those and like really being able to leverage those to maximize your results and what you want. And it's kind of the same thing in this space with our health and being able to get to goals that we have with fertility and motherhood and also just how we feel on a daily basis and kind of that ease and peace that you speak about.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. I love hearing about the corporate version.
Yeah. So I love how you talk about like making our health easy. What are some tangible ways to do that? Because I know sometimes, at least for me, when I've been down this road, it can feel like it's so complicated or there's so many things to do or it's so expensive if you're looking at things that kind of add up from a monetary perspective.
Yeah, I know. And the reason I have that, kind of in my bio and something that I always reflect on and come back to is if anything is really hard, we're not going to be able to do it for very long.
Mhm.
And I feel like in the wellness world, we're almost known for making things as complicated as possible. And so I have just seen over the years, I get tons of patients who've been working with, let's just say, different types of providers, even in the wellness space, who come in and are so exhausted from everything they've been doing, burnt out, not complying, like not taking all the supplements, not doing all the things because it's so expensive, it's so exhausting. And so I figure, well, maybe if we're not doing all the things, but we're doing some of the things really well, they're still going to have improvement. So that's kind of what I always start with my patients. I like to say it's like the low hanging fruit. We really focus on sleep and eating whole foods and, resting and prioritizing time where you're doing things that you love. And if you're not doing those things, then adding in all of these extras is going to be kind of fruitless.
Mhm.
And so starting with those simple things first, and, we can say what those are. Kind of my pillars are sleep is just the absolute biggest one I work on people with is sleep. If you want to think of the number one thing you could do for your health every day that could do more for you than anything else, it's sleep. And I can't tell you how many people where it's like, well, this is the first time a day I get to relax is like the end of the day after dinner. So like, that's when I really want to watch mindless TV and just chill. And I try to reframe that for people of like, okay, that time after dinner can still be you time, but you time is going to sleep because that is what's actually nourishing yourself and taking care of yourself. And that is doing something for you that then is going to make you feel better the next day. So you don't feel so drained and exhausted and feel like you need that mindless TV scroll.
Yeah.
So I would say if anyone could do anything this week, it would be 9 p.m. You are like headed to bed, if not already in bed. In your
Yes.
bed by 9:30. I like to get in bed at 8:30 if I can. And I say that, and I have 3 animals, a daughter, and I work till 6:30. So, that doesn't mean it's easy to do that. It's not always easy, but it means that, I'm doing that one thing I know I can grab every day to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And it's
I
free.
love going to bed like 9:30. And I feel like when I do, I fall asleep actually so much faster than if I go to
Yes.
bed even 10:30. Like not a big dramatic difference.
Exactly. And in Chinese medicine, we say that's because at 11 p.m., that's the time that the liver, it's the kind of the hour of the liver. And so we really need to be asleep by that time. We say the liver in Chinese medicine is responsible for almost like detoxing and restoring the blood in the body. We could think of that as like menstrual blood, as like, blood that carries all of our hormones and proteins and nourishment. And it's very important that we're asleep by that time, so that from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., the liver is able to like kind of restore and reboot. So if we are like just getting bed at 10:30, it's likely that we're not in deep sleep by 11 p.m. And then you almost get that second wind of energy. So yeah, in Chinese medicine, at least, I can totally verify, yes, you're not sleeping as good if you're just finally, kind of winding down at 10:30.
Yeah, it's so helpful to hear the why behind some of these things, because I've found that too on my own journey. Like when it's like, do this, do this, do this, and you're kind of like, it's hard to be compliant, but when you hear the why and you really understand like how it makes a difference, it's easier. Like for me, one thing I've leaned into a lot this year is like morning light. And that initially was like hard. I'm like, I don't want to be up and like outside looking at the sky at 6:30. But once I really understood all of the benefits and how it would help like various hormones, it made it a lot easier. And I've honestly loved doing it once I got through those like first few weeks. I do have a sleep question for you, though. My husband and I were just talking about this morning, because he was like, I know it's hard for us to like work out consistently and like get to spend time together with our schedules right now. He's like, he gets up early, like at 5. Said, what do you think about getting up at 5 and like working out together in the mornings? And my first answer was like, ooh, I don't know if I can compromise my sleep for that. But I know there is also research about like working out can actually help your sleep. And so what do you think, like, when it comes to waking up an hour or an hour and 30 minutes earlier to do a workout? Is it worth it, or should we really prioritize the sleep?
I would say if you're going to bed at a good time and you're still getting 7 to 8 hours, then I would say it's great, and then the second part is, do you feel good doing it? How's your cycle? Your period is always going to be your report card to let you know if that's affecting you in a negative way. But I would say if you're able to be asleep, by 9 o'clock, you're in bed by 8:30, you still like feel like you're getting a really good night's sleep up until that time, then I think it's great. And, the exercise is really wonderful and has all of its benefits as well. And they even say, exercise can counteract less sleep. So
I've heard that.
kind of override, the things that you're missing out on from sleep, which makes it hard to make the call that you're trying to make.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, see how you feel doing it. When I was driving home yesterday, I had this thought where I was like, it's so hard to check all the boxes sometimes. Like I was thinking particularly about my animals, actually, because I was like, I feel like I've got a good balance of like, I've figured out times where I can work out. I've been going to like a 6 a.m. yoga class 2 mornings a week that works with my schedule. Scheduling dates with my husband, obviously time with my daughter, which I'm fortunate to have a ton of, keeping my business going and, taking care of all my patients, and then also taking time for myself and doing something that I love. And then I'm like, my pets, like, I feel like my pets are neglected, and I was like, sometimes we're just pulled in so many directions, and it is sometimes just hard to check all the boxes. And so we have to forgive ourselves and be patient with ourselves and know that, in time we'll find an ebb and flow with the balance of all those different things.
Yes. In times we sit on the couch with our pets a lot more, but I walked by my dog this morning. He was on the couch and I was just like rushing past him to get our son breakfast. And then I walked back and I said, sorry, Boo. And I didn't say hi to you, or I didn't like acknowledge you. That was really rude of me.
Exactly. Yeah.
What would you say to women who, if they're trying to get pregnant, they feel like they're doing all the things right, and it's just not happening?
I would say that they might just not have figured out what that thing is. I feel like I don't know if this is the best thing to say, but I don't feel like you should have to be doing all the things to be able to get pregnant.
Yeah.
I think you should be doing the things that you need to be doing, and that kind of goes back to the ease, is that we're all doing all the things because we're all trying to do all the things that if we took 10 women in a room who were trying to conceive and we wanted to make sure that we covered all of the bases of all 10 of these women, it's like, that's kind of what the protocol that everyone's following.
Yeah.
So versus like the protocol that you need, So maybe someone has PCOS, but they're doing all the things for like PCOS, endo, and autoimmune conditions, stress, so many things, instead of really dialing in what they need, and maybe doing more of that, more focused. And then it could also just be that they haven't figured out what that is.
Right.
And that's the hard part, and the endless question and rabbit hole of what is that thing,
Mm-hmm.
But I can't tell you how many times I have women who maybe have been trying for years, and then when they figure out what that thing is, it happens, And so it's really hard.
Yeah, it is for sure. And like you said, every woman's journey is so different. And I think when it comes to choosing providers and protocols and procedures, like that varies a ton from person to person as well. And it often is a deeply like personal, emotional decision. So my next question I'm asking with a ton of empathy for people on both sides of this decision, those who have gone down this path and those who are trying everything in their power to avoid it. What are your thoughts on IVF?
I so many of my patients are doing IVF, and I've worked with IVF patients for years, and I think it can be a wonderful tool, and sometimes it is the thing that helps someone have a baby. I think that you should be as prepared as possible once you get there and have really crossed off all the other boxes, made sure that you've really made sure that it's the last thing that you need or could try. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because even with IVF, it's not a guarantee that that's going to be the thing that works. And so if you're already in the IVF realm and maybe you haven't checked off some of the more fundamental things like eating enough food, sleeping enough, ruling out autoimmune conditions or, thyroid issues or endometriosis or something like that, even once you start IVF, you're still going to then at some point probably be faced with the time that you have to go back and deal with those things. I would say that's where most of my patients are at, is they've been going through IVF and now it's not working and they're trying to kind of like regroup. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, my biggest advice and I guess, yeah, biggest word of advice or helpful thing would be to rule everything out first. And but yeah, I have a positive view of IVF. I think it is a wonderful thing, and I'm so thankful that so many women have it. I just think using it when it's really needed and not just like as a first line of,
Yes.
of an option. If that makes
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. And I feel that way too, just in friends and people that I've seen go through it. Like there's some friends that have been on this journey for so many years and, it's right for them. But then there's other people that I hear they've been trying for 6 months and then it's like, oh yeah, you should do IVF or you should do an IUI. And it's like, those are the ones that I get a little bit, I don't know, kind of protective of, where it's like, there's a lot of other things you can try before you go into that like very expensive and sometimes painful option.
Yeah, and I think at least because when I first started practicing, and I didn't know a ton about IVF, in terms of I knew about a lot about it on paper, right? But I didn't know in practice what it was really like or what it was like to go work with a fertility doctor. And of course, you cannot completely generalize. Like every fertility doctor is different, but what I found in the beginning of my practice is I would recommend people to just go get a workup at their fertility doctor, like get a diagnosis, figure out what the root cause is, like why you're not getting pregnant, and just kind of like open that door. And then like come back here and we can address that holistically or, try to figure out or support it or support whatever treatments they're recommending. And then time and time again, I found out they were going in, they were doing minimal blood work. They were yes, checking things off the list for some structural things like, an HSG or, looking inside the uterus, ultrasound, stuff like that. But then they were never getting a diagnosis. It was never like, this is why you're not getting pregnant. I would say most of the time it was always just unexplained fertility issues, and then they would pretty much immediately get started on the same path to IVF, which again, for some women, they do get pregnant along the way. But I see the difficult cases, people who got pregnant quickly on that path, they're usually not ending up in my office. And I always try to say that to people, like my view is very biased because I only see the complicated patients that, it's not working for. But unfortunately, they're not where you're going to figure out what's going on. A lot of that is digging that you have to do on your own, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely kind of a hard part about, I don't know, probably any health journey, but definitely being on more of an alternative one. It's like feeling like you're always kind of in the middle of like getting inputs from different people and different practitioners. And like sometimes they're Western and sometimes they're not. And then you're trying to figure out like, what do I do? But you're not a doctor. You don't necessarily have like a medical or a scientific background. And so it is a lot to navigate, but I do think that it's worth it. And this is what I tell my husband all the time. I'm like, it is worth it. And like, for me, it is so worth it too, just in terms of like overall health optimization. Like you said, knowing yourself better and kind of knowing your triggers and things like that better too.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I tell all my patients they really are the expert.
Yeah. And a lot of times we know things intuitively, but it's until we get confirmation from someone that we're like, then we feel ready to act on it.
Yes, totally.
What should somebody do if they're interested in finding alternative practitioners, including acupuncturists in their area?
You know, I would say first asking around to friends and family and seeing if anyone has like firsthand experience with someone. Um, that's always, I don't know, I think firsthand experience is the best way to know what that's really like to work with somebody. Second to that, I would say looking on Google and reading Google reviews, reading stories from people who have actually worked with that patient or with that provider. Um, you know, I think a lot of people find people on social media, and that's definitely one way to find practitioners too in your area. But at least when patients ask me, like, oh, I have a friend who lives in, I don't know, some town in Florida, I look on Google and I just dive through those Google reviews. I try to find reviews or testimonials that are specific for what that patient is looking for, you know, so even if it's for fertility, like maybe looking like, oh, I have endometriosis, let's see if they have any reviews for someone who also had endometriosis and worked with that practitioner, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great way. And then also just starting to call people, setting up, I think most practitioners these days have free phone consultations. And so getting on the phone with them and asking them all the questions, making sure they're a good fit for you, you know, that's every person who wants to work with me, I always make sure we hop on a phone call first and that I know that I'm the best person for them and asking them the hard questions.
Yeah. That's such great advice. When you were evaluating your own career path early on, like how did acupuncture come in? Did you always know that you wanted to do that? And then where did your aspirations for owning your own clinic come in?
This is always such a funny question for me because there was not, when I look back at that time, I'm like, I have no idea how I ended up being an acupuncturist, truly. But it all makes sense at the same time. And I feel like I was just kind of called to this path and that's why things happened this way. But when I think back, I'm like, that's so wild that I just made the decision to like go to acupuncture school. But I was getting my bachelor's in biology. My husband was about to start chiropractic school in Houston. I was living here in Dallas. I went to go visit my brother in California and I saw a billboard, like an actual sign for a school that had Ayurveda, acupuncture, chiropractic, and physician assistants. And it was like an integrative medicine university. And so I just called and started asking about their programs and learned about the acupuncture program and felt like I was a really good fit. And my husband and I basically packed up our car and moved to California when I graduated.
That is so cool. Talk about just following your intuition and like the
Yeah.
sign literally that was in
A
front
sign.
of you.
And like I actually saw a sign. And then it was funny though, because reflecting on my life, really what I did growing up is I did ballet. I danced like 40 hours a week from when I was, you know, a young teen through high school, post high school. And one of my most prominent ballet teachers for years was a man who was from Taiwan. And he used to talk about acupuncture and more so than that, principles of Chinese medicine to us all the time. And us
Interesting.
girls all thought he was just crazy because, you know, we'd get out of our rehearsals, we'd be sweating and like in a leotard and it'd be cold outside and we would just be so hot. We would just want to walk to our car and he would always yell at us like, put on a jacket, like don't go outside in the cold where like your pores are open, you're going to get sick, you know? And just all kinds of funny Chinese medicine things like that, that I, looking back at now, totally understand. So it's weird that it was in my life in a way. And I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, yeah, it imprinted on your subconscious in some way, I think, from some of those childhood memories.
Yeah. And so then, what you ask about like starting your own practice, for acupuncturists, there's not a ton of us, especially here in Dallas, Texas. And really I would say kind of the only option is to go out on your own.
Oh,
When I first moved to Dallas, I connected with a couple of acupuncturists that were here and tried to look for like mentorship or, anything to see what I could do. And it's just a small world. So I think that's not the way it goes. And so it was kind of like push, you just kind of had to jump out there on your own and get started. So I just started. And so I started on my own. I was practicing out of a medical spa. I was very, very lucky to get the opportunity that I did because every patient that walked in the door there was my perfect women's health patient. And it's just
okay.
who walked in my door. I didn't have to market or advertise for it. That's who I got. And then when I had enough experience, then my husband and I started Totality together. So
That's so cool. Did you always know that you wanted to start a business with him, or was that like a big decision that you guys had to make together?
yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, when I first went to school, I don't think I consciously thought about what that would look like in practice, like that we would work together. But I think very quickly, once we were in that program together, we realized how well chiropractic and Chinese medicine work together. So pretty early on, we knew that we definitely wanted to have a practice together versus like separate. And we kind of joked because we got married in March of 2016 and we started that program together in the fall of 2016. And so we were like, it's a little bit of like a trial by fire for our marriage because we were together all day, every day, sharing a car, living in a town we didn't know anybody else. So we were just, and also under the highest stress possible. Our first trimester of school, you think in undergrad you're taking like 5 or 6 classes. We had like 16 classes.
Oh, wow.
So you talk about stress, the highest stress I've ever been in my life. And so we just joked, like, if we could get through the program together, like, we could probably work together.
Yeah. Well, and now, I mean, I've been to your space and I love it. And it's so just like, I
Thank
don't know,
you.
it's such a vibe. Like you and Michael are both there. You have your daughter, you have your little room where she can go and take a nap. And like you were breastfeeding her at one point when I was there. And it was like just so beautiful, like just this integration of like your work and your life. I'm sure you guys very intentionally like planned for some of those things, right?
Yeah, we did. We definitely did. But I think we're also just very lucky for it to work out the way it did. I think, yes, like we planned, but I also realize a lot of it is just, luck too. And I think we feel so, so lucky and so blessed to have the life that we have. And we're able to spend so much time with our daughter and together and do what we love. So yeah, it's
So
really
what do
awesome.
your days look like with just the schedule and the logistics of like you guys both working, seeing patients, having your daughter there? How do you make all that work?
Yeah, so it's constantly evolving, which I would say is its own challenge as she changes and like her age. So I came back to work 6 weeks postpartum, and so she was here with me. Like my husband would be up here the whole time I was working so that I could breastfeed her and also just see her. Like there was no way I could be away from her at that point. And then her and I would hang out up here while my husband did his shift. So we would alternate shifts. Like I would work the morning and he would work the afternoon, vice versa. And then as she's gotten older, like I'm trying to think when we really made the switch, probably around 9 months, just as she started to get more active and crawling and moving and yelling, they start to just like want to scream and
They do, yes.
for fun. And so once she started to get older, then we switched to where she stays home all the time and Michael and I switch places. So now Monday through Friday, or actually we just changed a little bit again, like I said, ever evolving, but Monday through Thursday we alternate morning and afternoon, and then we switch places at lunch. So
Oh,
we have like
nice.
an hour break between when I'm done and then when he starts, and we basically drive home, walk in the door, switch keys, and the other one leaves. And so that way she just gets to be home and play and
That is
be,
so
be a
nice.
baby.
And
Yeah, it's
yeah, so good for her too.
yeah.
I know you guys love to travel as a family, and you just recently got back from a trip to Colombia. What's it been like having your own business and fitting in travel and just the things that are really important to you all in life?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that's a big perk of running your own business and creating your own schedule is that we've always been able to look far enough ahead, block our schedules, move stuff around, and like be able to take trips. Travel is definitely important to us and something that we really, really love. And just also, I think it's hard as a business owner to shut down your business for any period of time, but realizing it's so worth it every time you do. And so also just having the confidence to be like, we're closed for this week and,
Yeah.
we'll see y'all next week. We do work really hard to kind of play our trips so that it's like mid one week and mid the other. And we'll try to see as many people as we can at the front of one week and the end of the next. So people don't skip out on care too much. But yeah, we love to travel, and Lucia has 3 stamps in her passport.
Wow, that is very impressive. Did she like to fly?
She hates the car and she hates a car seat. So to me, flying with her is so easy.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, even if she's freaking out, I can like stand up and walk around with her. But she's been great. Every flight we've flown with her has worked out really well. There's always hard moments. Of course, I think just travel
Yeah.
in general can be hard. So you throw a baby into it, it's going to be a little more challenging, but it's always still been very fun and gone as smooth as possible.
That's great. Well, and I found usually like they are very entertained. Like it is way better for them than a car where they're just like sitting there and they can't move and they're bored.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially every time we've traveled so far, it's been Michael and I. So I'm like, between the two of us, we can keep her entertained.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the fears that have crept in along the way, whether it was on your journey of trying to conceive or as a business owner, just some of those hesitations that you felt, and how did you overcome those, particularly when you were in kind of the thick of it and it was hard and you were maybe getting caught up in your head in some ways?
Yeah. So when I'm trying to think, so I could talk about like both instances, but I would say definitely when I was trying to get pregnant, I just had the feeling that it was never going to happen. Like that it just wasn't possible. And I think I never realized that's a thought that I think a lot of women have is like every month it doesn't happen. Your fear is actually that it just will never happen. The fear is not that it will take time. It's the fear that it won't ever happen. And that's how I felt exactly. Like I, I had always had a fear of that. I don't know why. I'd always had it in my head, that would be a hard thing for me. And actually, when I went on a trip to Taiwan with my school, to intern in a hospital there, we had a resident who was like our host, and he specialized in facial reading. So we go to dinner one night and he goes around the table and we're like, read our faces. And everyone gets things like, you're going to be super wealthy and like, you're going to be a princess and like marry an incredible man. And he gets to me and he says, you're going to have a hard time getting pregnant.
What?
Yes.
How old were you when that
Because of my
happened?
forehead. And I was like, oh my, and in that moment, it just like confirmed all the fears I'd ever had. And at that time, I was probably, I don't even know how old I was. That was probably 2018.
Okay.
So 26. And Michael and I were married, but nowhere near trying to have kids.
Right.
But it just was like this rock, in my stomach that I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe this guy just told me this. And no one else would even know that was something I'd already just had a feeling of. So whenever we
Yeah.
started trying and it wasn't happening, it just reconfirmed all of this. And eventually I scheduled a phone call with this Chinese medicine practitioner I'd always followed in Houston, Kathleen Funk, and she had acupuncture, and she was super cool, like functional medicine, Chinese medicine artist, and I scheduled a call with her, and I thought the call was going to be like, here's the new supplements you need to take, and here's the blood work you need to do. And actually she just talked to me about my mindset. And so I told her this, and she said, what I'm hearing is that you've always felt like it would be hard for you to get pregnant. And what he said is it would be hard, but nowhere in this has anyone said or thought that you wouldn't get pregnant. And so she's like, I think maybe you knew it would be hard, and a part of you knew it would be a challenge, but that doesn't mean you're not going to. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that, actually, that that was really true. And so it just kind of reframed the way I was thinking at it. And she was the first person to say to me, you work with women who are struggling to try to conceive. This just might be a journey that you're supposed to have so that you can start to understand what they're going through. And I say start to understand because what I went through was barely scratching the surface of my patients' journeys. By no means was that the equivalent to what many of my patients are going through, but it was, I do think it helped give me insight into some of that mindset. So those were some big fears of mine, and she really helped me reframe that and like look at it differently. And it helped me. It did give me more peace going through the rest of my journey.
I love that. I have goosebumps from that. I mean, so many parts of that story are just wild. Like the fact that he said that to you and then, seeking out that second opinion. I had to do something similar recently where someone had said something to me that was just like very outlandish and kind of intense. And I don't know, it just didn't make me feel good. And then I talked to someone else and they had like a completely different perspective. But one of the reasons I got the second opinion was not just so much for like the facts and the logistics on paper, but really to help me with my mindset, because I was like, I don't want that soundbite to be the thing that like I'm replaying in my head. I need other sound bites to replace it with.
Yes. And I try to do that, especially after having that experience. I try to do that with my patients a lot. And I actually had a patient who, some people are just very connected to like, maybe almost like clairvoyant, like you just have people in your life who you're like, you just see things, like you see things, and I had this patient who was kind of like that. She's always had dreams of things that come true. And she had a dream as a child that she, would never, what was it specifically? It was something like, I think she was pregnant. But in her mind as a child, she knew that like this would never happen or something like that. And so she always took this dream with her that she was never going to be able to have a baby. And she was actually in her IVF journey at this time. And so we kind of did the same thing and we dove in, and I don't remember all the specifics because this was a few years ago, but we dove into this dream and broke it apart and looked at it. And by the end of it, she was like, wait, I actually think I had a dream that I was going to have a baby.
Wow.
And she did. She did go on and have a baby. So
that's so awesome.
It's interesting how we, take these ideas or these things, like we almost morph them into something worse sometimes, so.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking about putting positive thoughts into our head, what is one of your favorite fertility acupuncture stories of how you've been able to help somebody transform on their journey?
Okay, that's a really good question, but let me think for a second. I think I'm trying to think because I have so many stories that are my favorite, and they're my favorite for all different reasons. Some are my favorite because I felt like I really played a role in them conceiving, and others are my favorite because they just had really challenging journeys, and I was so happy to see them get to the other side. I think one of my absolute favorites, though, was just because this patient was so sweet, but I saw her really early on, and I'll also put this in context. She's one of my favorites because she helped me understand how important patient education is. And so that's why it's a really big mainstay of my practice. But I had seen her, and I do this big deep dive with my first session with my patients, as you know, and now it's transformed to actually have a fertility course that I have all my patients take beforehand. But this one was just more of a one-on-one. We talked about her hormones and trying to understand like when you do certain blood work and why, because your hormones are doing certain things on certain days. And so they had just started trying to conceive, and she went into her doctor's office, and she had, sorry, I'm telling this a little out of order. So we knew because she'd been testing her LH that she had just ovulated that day. But it was day 21 of her cycle. And so when she went in to her doctor's appointment, they were like, oh, it's day 21 of your cycle. Let's do a day 21 progesterone test to confirm that you're ovulating, right? And she was like, okay, cool. So they do that test, and then it came back and she had no progesterone yet because she had just ovulated. And so the nurse told her, oh, you're actually probably not going to ovulate this cycle. Like, I don't even know if you're going to get your period. Especially if you're trying to conceive, like we need to do more blood work and like more intensive stuff. Really freaked her out. And we're going to set up this follow-up appointment with her doctor. And so she called me, thankfully, and was like, okay, I know we just talked about all this stuff and it doesn't seem right because I think what we talked about was that I just ovulated that day, and she knew it was maybe not right, but it really shook her up. She was teary. And I was like, okay, we know you ovulated that day. There's no way your progesterone would have been high, right? We have to wait now a week before you could even take that test for it to be positive, or for it to show anything helpful. So kind of calmed her nerves just through education and empowerment. And she did, in fact, ovulate. She didn't go back for a progesterone test, but she ended up getting pregnant that cycle.
Wow.
She never needed to do it again. And so obviously that was a very short journey, but it really drove home the point to me that patients need to understand why they're having lab tests done. Patients need to understand the hormone physiology behind it so they can understand what the results mean. And you need to be tough and strong going through this journey so you can speak up for yourself. So it was just a kind of a unique journey, and it really inspired me doing all of the extra patient education that I do now.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. So how can people work with you if they're interested in going deeper?
Yeah, so I work with people a couple of different ways. I really start everything with a complimentary phone consultation, and that's just time for us to chat and make sure I'm a good fit, and then see what, options I think would be best for you. Really the two biggest differences would be either working together virtually. So that would be where we're really focusing on just Chinese herbal medicine, supplements, diet, lifestyle, everything except for acupuncture. We do looking at basal body temperature charts, any like fertility monitors you're using. We review blood work and lab work, but no acupuncture. And I usually then check in with people every 4 weeks. And now then the other option would be doing that plus acupuncture, where you're coming in weekly and we're doing acupuncture and we're doing all of the other things, herbal medicine, supplements, diet, and lifestyle. So those are really the two routes that I take with people. And I've created the more virtual route because for some people, I find they actually need a lot of work before we come in and we start doing acupuncture. Okay. So let's say someone isn't, like they go to bed every night at 1 a.m. and they don't make any of their food at home. Like everything they eat is takeout. There's a lot of foundational stuff that we need to work on and build up first. I want to do that before I have someone come in and start, investing their time and finances in weekly acupuncture.
That is so smart. Well, and I love that too, because like I recently heard someone say regarding supplements, like you can be taking all the supplements in the world, but if you're like super stressed and your digestion like sucks, it's not going to matter.
Exactly.
So getting some of those things in working order, yeah, before you spend the money and the time on like doing some of those more deeper protocols.
Exactly. Yeah, I try to look at everything like from a very tiered system of like the basic foundation, and like let's roll everything out there. I can't tell you how many patients I've had come in who just weren't eating enough food, were working out too much and not eating enough. If I could send one message out there to women, it's eat more food. If you're trying to have a baby, if your cycle's irregular and you work out a lot and you are like watching carbs and like keeping everything really minimal and eating a lot of just like salads, you probably need to eat more food. And I know that sounds like a generalization, but I see so many women where this happens, and within maybe a couple of sessions and they've started increasing their caloric intake, their cycles are starting to be more regular, and a lot of times they get pregnant.
Wow. And I know you mentioned eating more food earlier on the call. How does someone know if they're eating enough food or not? Like, is it a number of calories? Is it hunger cues? Like, what are you supposed to be looking for?
I really look at your period. Is your cycle regular? Like that's why women are, in a way, I think we feel cursed that we have to have a period, but it's actually such a blessing because it tells us so much about, it's like our report card. It tells us how well everything that we're doing is working. That's always going to be the measure I come back to. If your cycle is very irregular or you don't have a cycle at all, and you think you're under eating, try eating more food first. Really being honest with yourself. I think most women know when they're under eating. It's not often that I have women who have no idea they're under eating. Typically, they're like, okay, yeah, a lot of these women also have a history with like disordered eating, maybe in high school or in college. A lot of the times when we start to dive deeper, that's something that's there. And it's very hard for them to want or to feel like they can eat more. So I wouldn't say it's like a big secret. It's definitely kind of obvious whenever that's the case. So I don't want people who are like out there, really working hard to get enough protein thinking, oh my God, am I still not eating enough food? I think
right.
Yeah. So not to add a new fear. It's if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that's probably me. It probably
Okay.
is. So yeah.
That's really helpful advice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are almost done, but is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
Let me think for a second. I don't know. I think I would just say that I like to remind my patients that it's so much more likely that you will have a baby than will not. And knowing that, kind of like what we talked back at the beginning of, if it feels like you're doing all the things and it's not working, talk to someone else, get a second opinion, talk to a different provider, talk to another friend, because it's most likely just that you haven't found what it is, not that you're doing all the things and they're not working. And also, because we have not talked about this yet, I just realized, have your husband or partner or whoever this man in your life is get a sperm analysis.
Yes. Tell us more about that.
It is 50-50. I think studies show there's like, I don't know, it's almost broken up evenly of, women only issues, men only issues, and then couples have a compound of both. So let's say 50% of the time there is a male factor issue involved. I think most of the time it's very rare for me that patients do get a sperm analysis and that it looks great. So get it earlier than you think. I think there's a little bit more of a mental block for men to want to get that sperm analysis done. I find a lot of men are fearful of it. And, I think just finding ways to encourage and have that conversation and get them to do it sooner than later. And then you can just knock it off the list. Like, okay, cool. Looks amazing. We don't have to worry about it, but if you've spent 6 months taking all the supplements, doing all the things, going to acupuncture, changing your workout, changing your food, and your husband hasn't had a sperm analysis yet, it's very unfair, and you could also be doing all those things and there's actually nothing wrong with you at all. And it's all on that side. And that has happened countless times with my patients. So
yeah. Well, and you mentioned like periods are a great indicator of women's overall health. I've also heard that sperm analysis are a great indicator of a man's overall health.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I tell my patients. Like, you have a period, so we can see that you're ovulating. We can test your progesterone. You also have so many symptoms and signs from just tracking your cycle. And on men, we see nothing. They could appear totally healthy, although a lot of times there are signs, especially if your husband is also super high stress, doesn't eat great food, maybe doesn't sleep well, has a struggle putting on muscle mass, low energy, low libido. Like there are also signs and symptoms that maybe there's an underlying hormonal imbalance, but there could also be something like a varicocele or like a structural thing or a cyst or something that you couldn't see otherwise, an infection, like a low-grade infection. So there's lots of things that could be going on that side that we may not see from any other reason.
That's so interesting. Well, and I think in both instances, in most cases, in most marriages, it's like the woman that's driving the ship regardless, even if it is encouraging the man to do the work. And so what advice do you have for women who are just a little bit exhausted and burnt out from like having to do all the things for both parties?
Yeah, I know that is so hard. And I have a lot of women where they know. It's interesting because I'll do an initial consultation with a woman, and I think based on this conversation that there's nothing going on her husband's side. Like, she's presenting her issues to me, like she knows it's all her. And then at the end, it's like, oh, but we know we have an issue, like a male factor fertility issue. And I'm like, oh, okay. because it sounds like everything is totally fine with you, but she has still taken it on. Like, even though I know there's an issue on this side, I can't make him do that, anything or whatever. I can't control him. So I'm like still going to do what I can control, which is for me, and so taking that stress on, and to your point, kind of managing for both parties. And at one point, unfortunately, you do have to just let go and give it up to them. And you have to let them drive the ship. And that's a really hard call, but at the same time, you will just burn yourself out if you were trying to control both sides completely.
And can acupuncture and like the Chinese medicine stuff help men that are having the issue as well?
Yep, definitely. There's, herbs and acupuncture have both been shown to improve hormonal balance in men and improve sperm parameters. So a lot of times I find it harder to get men to come into acupuncture. I don't know if it's just committing the time or what it is. I would also say men tend to be my more sensitive patients
That's funny.
with needles, which is really funny. But a lot of times I'll work with them virtually. So like maybe their wife is coming into acupuncture, but I'll connect with them. We'll do a phone consultation. We go through all their health history and do like diet, lifestyle, maybe herbal medicine, maybe supplements, and come up with a protocol that they feel like works for them outside of the treatment room.
Okay, got
And
it.
it can be very effective. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm so glad we had this conversation. I know fertility is such a big thing. It seems like for so many women in our generation, I'm just constantly blown away by the amount of friends and people in my circle that are having issues. It just seems wild, honestly, in comparison to like how it used to be. And I'm sure that's a whole nother conversation that maybe we can have someday. But
Totally. Yes.
this has been great. And you've shared so much wisdom that for people, especially that are on the more traditional path, this is likely a lot of new news for them to digest and absorb and maybe integrate into their plans as well. So thank you for being on.
Yay. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait to talk more.